Welcome to our webinar this evening. I appreciate you all coming. It might have been a little required for some of you, but I hope you gleaned something from this. I had a really good time doing the research for this particular presentation, and student engagement is something we all should be interested in, just because if they're not engaged, they're probably not getting what they need to out of your course. This is an interactive webinar, so there will be times where I will ask you to contribute and participate in it, so that it's not just me yipping about what the literature says about student engagement. All right, where's my buttons? There they are. Oop, now I got to move this over here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to define student engagement, and what's interesting about that particular objective for this evening is that it's defined many different ways, and I'm sure you in your classroom have a different set of standards for what you consider student engagement versus somebody else. It also depends on the content you're teaching and what type of engagement you need. For example, if we're looking at our pre-med bio students, and we want them engaged in nursing students, we want them engaged to be able to save lives, which is a little bit different than engaging your students to become future educators. So all of those things play into how one defines student engagement. Of course, we're going to talk about the benefits of student engagement, and then we're going to identify common elements, which are, those are the pillars, and then maybe discuss amongst all of us some teaching strategies that support student engagement and learning. So with that, every now and then we're going to come up with a little slide that says using groups in Zoom. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pose a little question and then ship you off into a different room, and you'll discuss it in your room, and I'll explain these as we go along. And then we'll all come back together, and one of your representatives from your room will explain to everybody else what you all talked about. And so when we see this slide right here, that means we're getting ready to do something. And I've tried to space them out so that we're active for most of the webinar. So let's do a test, okay? Wait, hold on, I have a, okay. Let's do a test. So I'm going to divide you into two rooms. In just a minute, you're going to be shipped somewhere else, and then you can just chat with your people in there for just the time being. We're just testing this out, and then I'll come and visit you, and then we'll all reconvene. All right, so let's get started. So that's how the activity slides work. And believe it or not, we're getting ready to go straight into another activity, because I want you to spend about 2 minutes with your group, and I want you to think about student engagement. And what does that mean? What does it look like in your classroom? And how do you measure it? Okay? So what does student engagement mean? What do you think does it look like in your classroom? And how do you measure if students are engaged? Now, what I'm going to ask you all to do in your groups is to spend about 2 to 3 minutes discussing this as a group, and then choose one person to report back to the main group. Does that make sense to you all? Did everybody get that? Okay. All right. So here we go. What does student engagement mean? What does it look like in your classroom? And how do you measure it? Here we go. Breakout rooms.
It can be an active participant in an exercise. It can be an active participant in discussion. And it can also be someone there watching what's going on and trying to synthesize the information that takes place. They don't necessarily have to be speaking. They don't have to They don't necessarily have to be speaking as long as they are learning, understanding, and thinking about the topic that's being discussed by others. Now, normally, ideally, you'd like to have discussion going back and forth amongst a whole bunch of people. So active learning for me is just being there in the class, and by there, not necessarily physical presence, but by an intellectual presence, being there and participating in what's going on.
Hey, Dan, we're all back in the group. That was a really good point. I liked like what you just said about intellectual presence, because it's not just about being in the classroom. It's about facilitating learning, and that's wonderful. So does anybody else have anything they would like to share from their groups that just struck a chord with you?
We were talking in our group about different kinds of ways that we try to find out kind of what students might know, and it really came to kind of what we call a kind of a formative assessment thing, using I think Cindy called kind of pseudo quizzes to kind of find out what they might know at a given time, and so not necessarily for a grade, but just to find out what they know. And I was sharing that there's a program called Poll Everywhere, which I'm sure you're aware of. And Poll Everywhere is a way to kind of engage with your students to find out what they know about a point without necessarily having to identify themselves as the person that doesn't know it. And we can talk about it more later, but it's a program where they can use their telephones as a way to engage with your screen, and you can see what people know and don't know in real time. So they don't really talk, but you actually see what they do or don't know based on how they react with that program.
And pillar number 4 is multimedia and technology. You just hit that one, Tom Hiley. Excellent. All right. Well, now here's what's going to happen next. I'm going to give you a little rundown of what the literature said. Basically, what I found was a literature review about student engagement, and it was you can see it right. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
See the PowerPoint? Okay. Taylor and Parsons. Now, I will say that student engagement has been most widely studied in K-12, not necessarily higher ed. However, the fact of the matter is this: we don't engage our students, they're not going to learn too. So I think we can draw some things from the 6 pillars. And I better have my notes. So, let's see here. Student engagement primarily and historically has been focused upon increasing achievement. So the earlier studies and research on student engagement was, are they attending school? Are they passing? And what has happened is there's been a shift in defining student engagement, where now it involves, are they learning? Which I think is kind of interesting. Like from a professional educator's point of view, why wasn't learning thought of to begin with? But really it was there, student engagement was there to decrease behavior problems, increase the likelihood of retention and graduation, and the whole behavior thing. If they're behaving, that means they're engaged. And so as the literature and research became more prevalent, that shift changed to, are they engaged in learning? And so that's kind of the type of engagement we are discussing this evening, is not, are they necessarily participating, because we do have quiet students out there, but are they learning? Are they engaged in the learning process? And so here's what the literature has to say. To define student engagement, educators, we all as faculty and educators hope students will become successful learners. You can clearly tell me stories right now of students that are disengaged in your class. And they do so for a variety of reasons, all of which could be its own independent study, but we're not going there today. Um, the literature in the research that I read, you will find that a lot of people don't agree on one single definition. So did you notice while you were talking in your groups how each one of you had a different view of what it meant for a student to be engaged? And that's basically what the literature supports. You know, you have several types of engagement: academic, cognitive, intellectual, emotional, behavioral, you know, and each one of those all attribute to whether or not our students are learning in our class. Um, you know, if you think historically, if they're behaving, that means they're engaged. Does that mean they're learning? And so what we have to do with regards to our position is what can we do as their teachers to engage them in their learning, not necessarily making sure they're staying awake and their head is up off their desk or not in their phones. So when measuring student engagement, like I said, the history, look, there's Cindy. The history of student engagement really measured whether or not they come to class, they scored well on their tests, and they graduated. But nowhere again in that stream of measurement was there anything about learning, student engagement and learning. Are they interested? How much time are they spending on task? Are they enjoying what they're learning? And so those are the types of things that we're going to focus on today. And I will say this, in the literature, they of course surveyed, you know, the whole God and country, including students and teachers. And they found a discrepancy between what students called engagement and what we think as educators is engagement. And I think that's important to consider, because if we are to engage our students, their definition of that exact term is different than ours. And so that kind of opens up okay, so what do we do to get them engaged in their learning? And hopefully we'll have some answers by the end of this webinar. So I'm not going to send you all out to any groups right now. What I want to do is just kind of follow up. Are there any changes to your definition or anything you would like to add at this time?
Well, I'd just like to add that when you say that, you know, engagement can be defined differently by students and by their teachers, professors, that as the professor, I think we've got a kind of a bigger role in making sure that happens. Mm-hmm. One part of that to me is knowing my students well enough to know that not everybody learns the same way. So a visual might be great engagement for some students, whereas audio would be a better engagement for another, or hands-on kind of a kinesthetic activity might be a better engagement for some. So knowing my students well, I think, is something that goes a long way to helping you engage with your students.
I agree. Absolutely, Tim.
Excellent. Excellent. And again, I would think that like engaging students in English is going to be a hell of a lot different than engaging students in mathematics.
Exactly.
So your content also drives that form of engagement, along with the student preferences and their learning styles. Right. All right. So let's roll on here. So now we're going to get into what the literature deems as the 6 things we need to think about when we're engaging our students. And to kind of give you the lay of the land, we're going to go through 3 of them. Then we're going to take a halftime, divide up into groups, talk about those 3, and come back and finish it up. Okay? Mm-hmm. So interaction. interaction is the first pillar. Well, let me reverse here a little bit. The literature, while they didn't agree on a definition, they did have common strategies, and out of that literature there was kind of 6 common themes that went across. So that's how these came about. Interaction is important. Respectful relationships and interaction, both virtual because of our online students and that component, and personal, our in-seat, are shown to improve student engagement. Especially our younger students, they are intensely social and interactive learners. I mean, you can see them interacting from their walk from one class to another. They got that phone right there. The research repeatedly showed that students want stronger relationships with teachers, with each other, and with their communities. They want their teachers to know them as people, not just a thing in this class that's got to take this test. Students want their teachers to know how they learn. They want their teachers to take into account what they understand and what they misunderstand. And Tom, that formative assessment piece drives home that where are your misconceptions? Okay, that generates that sort of relationship. And students want their teachers to establish learning environments that build interdependent relationships and where you have kind of a culture and a community of learners rather than this is your assignment, go get it done. Hey, we're all doing this. We're all learning this. That's kind of more of what the literature said that engages students rather than just a list of assignments. Students listed 3 criteria that correlate to the concept of interaction. They want to learn from and with each other and people in their community. They want to connect with experts and expertise. And they want to have opportunities for dialogue and conversation. Now, I think it's pretty interesting connecting with experts and expertise. You know, I manage 20 students in the library, the work study students, and they are always trying to get internships, volunteer hours, and connect themselves with their people in their profession. And you know, theory to practice, you know, I read the literature, I see what student engagement means to these people. But just today, I had a student come in and said, hey, I got a contact so I can go out and do this and connect with this person and interact with this person in my field. And so those types of things really motivate and engage your students.
May I just
Yes,
kind of
yes, anytime. Absolutely.
This reminds me, like when I was at the University of Cincinnati and I was teaching a course, and it was for reading and writing foundations for intervention specialists. And the times or 2 times during the semester where I'd bring in an active intervention specialist from the schools to answer questions that they had. We did a little video interview and they watched that interview and they had questions. And they always said that was the highlight for them because they were actually talking to someone, an expert in the field. But again, as the professor, it's our job to kind of bring that person in or have them virtually because they do really appreciate that because they want to know what's the job really like.
Well, and I think that particular component makes the content real to them. And you know, and until it's made real, until they have that interaction with that local expert or the person in the field, it's just content.
Right.
You know, what does this mean to me? And I'm raising 2 of these young ones, and they are indubitably a little self-centered. This is what it's about me. All right, so let's go on to number 2. I need to pay attention to the time. All right. Exploration. Exploration is pillar number 2. So we have interaction, and now we know these kids like to explore. I say kids, young adults. Classroom practices reported to engage learners are predominantly inquiry-based, problem-based, and exploratory. Today's learners ask for the opportunity to explore, to find solutions and answers for themselves. There was a quote in the literature review, and I want to read it directly to you. A student was quoted as saying, "Just as we want to learn about the web by clicking our own path through cyberspace, we want to learn about our subjects through exploration. It's not enough to accept the professor's word. We want to be challenged to reach our own conclusions and find our own results. The need to explore is implicit to our desire to learn." Now, number one, I don't know what student used those words, but they found somebody to do
Yeah,
that. But that's pretty interesting. I mean, you think about the way that they click and go and explore their social media and explore, I need to look this up. What if we were to tweak our instruction to capitalize on that need for them to explore? And I think that is what I found, number one, most interesting about this pillar. The other thing, we're talking about the digital world, and Becky, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this in particular. The literature said that the digital media is reshaping our language, especially the role of oral language and how we communicate with people. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with that. I think it is, and not just orally, but also written. I don't know that I don't know that it's very progressive. It seems like it's a little regressive. They speak to each other in kind of broken English, it seems. The ability to form complete sentences and to express themselves without starting out saying, I mean, and ending with, it seems like all of that has, just gone by the wayside. And along with their spelling, which, texting just totally destroyed that. And it seems like they want to repeat a lot of popular phrases, and
so I low key trying to get what you say right now.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you're on it. And I think some of that's okay. And I even try to engage some of that myself just to show them that, I'm hip and I know I can decode their language and, I'm coming to them where they are, all of that. But I worry sometimes that they don't express themselves. They express their peers. They express their generation. And they speak almost collectively, and I don't see as much individuality because of that. They absorb so much of the digital world that
collectively they're all saying the same thing.
Exactly, yeah, and in the same language. So anyway, that's my view. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Ellen, if I may.
Yes.
I think we talked about this topic during the conventional professional development in the fall before start of school when we had those sessions for the new faculty. We did talk about the difference between the three generations, the millennials.
Right, yes.
I think they're good with their technology when it is something they're comfortable with within their phone. It's their small world, like maybe Instagram, Facebook, whatever. But outside of that, like your regular communication in terms of reading emails that you send as a faculty, you still have to be old school. When you get to class, don't assume they've read the email.
Yes. Absolutely
80% of them actually have no clue that you sent such an important email.
Yeah, I do know that to be for certain because
so
I don't mind.
Sometimes I even apologize repeating myself over email. Sometimes I say just a friendly reminder emails like 3-4 times. Finally, I get somebody asking, can you extend me the quiz? And so it's not like the digital world has really shaped their life for the good all the time. Sometimes it does, yes.
Right.
Like the clicker and stuff that we used to pay, it's cheaper now. Like you can use your cell phone as a clicker.
Right.
So it is shaping their world and express their communication, but it also, you still have to have some of the old school methods to make sure that the digital communication is actually shaping the role, and you have to keep telling them, please check email, please check email.
Well, and
It's
keep
not like
telling them,
you're
because I'm going to tell
babysitting
you
them.
right now today that the work study students told me I get all these emails and I never read them, and
No.
I laid straight into them. So
Yeah,
I got your back
even
there.
you look at your screen, video games, social media. So those are their world that they're comfortable with, that they have no problems with.
Right.
It's using the daily technology like us communicating, that's where the disconnect happens.
Right.
A lot of the times, if you try your best to send them maybe 2-3 reminders, it may be an extra email for you, but trust me, it just goes that extra bit.
Mm-hmm.
Make
Absolutely.
sure that your
Absolutely.
classes, otherwise you have chaos at hand when you show up at 8 a.m. in the morning. Everyone's just so scrambling and have no idea what's happening. And
Yes.
so the digital world has not entirely shaped them. It does have that languages, the communication issue
Right.
definitely persists.
So with regards to exploration, the last thing I want to point out is that this situated in action piece. You know, if you're exploring, you are plopping them in kind of a situation where they can explore how things work in real life. And that goes back to some of the other things that we have touched on prior. All right, so let's get to number 3, relevancy. I mean, we all must agree that if it's not relevant to our lives, we're probably not very engaged, just as humans in general. But one common prerequisite for engaging learners is to provide that relevancy. They need to know the real life scenarios whenever possible, as opposed to just being told the theoretical and text-based. So the literature said a couple of things about that. It talked about effective teaching and making things relevant, and there were 5 things that 5 characteristics of thoughtfully designed, relevant learning tasks. The task must require and instill deep thinking. It immerses the students in disciplinary inquiry. It's connected to the world outside of the classroom. It has intellectual rigor and substantive conversation. Now, of those things, I want to point out, I have said already multiple times, these students like conversation, and they want to talk about what's relevant, and they want it to relate to their lives and their lives in the future. And that's a common thread throughout all of these 6 pillars, is that you've got your pillars, but inside each of those pillars, there's some sort of communication that they are desiring in order to engage themselves. Finally, the research suggests that activities and curricula must have the following factors to engage learners completely. Number 1, relevancy. The topic connects with students' interests and concerns. Number 2, responsibility. Students have genuine control over what, why, how, and when they organize their learning, of course with our guidance. And 3, reality. Solving problems or making progress genuinely matters to someone. And so those are 3 things when you're designing lessons or activities in class. You do want to try to make it as relevant as possible so that they understand the why. Why am I learning this? So with that being said, what I would like to do at this point is I'm going to throw you into groups. I'm going to give you 3 minutes because we're going to run out of time. 3 minutes. In your group, you will decide the 3 things that have resonated with you all so far. I will ask for a representative from each group to talk. Are you ready?
Yep.
Everybody understand?
Yep.
Awesome.
One thing
Yes.
I'm saying, Kumara, is my daughter is extremely shy, but she has always been a very good student. And this teachers who've actually penalized her for her shyness,
Yeah,
really broken down her engagement.
I agree.
Yeah.
Because there's not really a rubric for assessing engagement, like a class participation grade. Unless you really have a test that they have to do every single time, it's really hard to engage that. Like you said, your daughter is shy, so she may be learning but doesn't want to talk.
But you
So
can have written engagement.
yeah,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
there
She
should
definitely
be
going to
alternate ways
write
of
about it.
engagement.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have everybody back? Where is everybody?
I think so. Is Joel there? Is Cindy there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. All right.
Everybody's here. Everybody's here.
Oh, whoopsie. Oh, my goodness gracious sakes. So,
I thought
whoa.
I did that for a minute.
Oh, my goodness. All right. My bad. My touchy mouse. Now, where is everybody? Where are all my people? Why am I? Oh, okay. Never mind. I got you now. I had you all in a little line right here. Okay, so I know Becky was in a group and then Cynthia was in another group. So Becky's group, give me 3 things you got from that.
Well, let's see. One was about, well, I'll just say one thing that I shared was about when Kumar brought up the fact that our students don't read and respond to our emails. If we do that as a project where you send an email and you say, respond to this, send a reply for credit, and then you credit those that did, and don't even tell them you're doing that, and then kind of add it up and then show them, these are the people who responded to my email, and then that will increase the amount of people who want to read to know what's going on in the class so that they can get some points. So I thought that was kind of a good thing that we kind of agreed on. And Dan said that if they know that what they're doing is being measured in some way, that will actually help build their engagement. And I think he's right about that. Trying to think of other things that we said. I know that we were talking about different ways of engagement and different people. I know Kumar said he was glad that was the thing that we were talking about, and about how students engage in different ways, and we need to have different ways of measuring that or responding to that, whether it is written or digital or oral or whatever. And that the whole thing about being in a conversation, creating conversations. So getting them to talk. Oh, and Shannon was talking about how whatever she throws out there for them to explore, they want to collaborate. They want to be collaborative about it. And she will be there to guide them, but she's not going to give them the answers. And so they have to work together in order to be successful with some of these rather challenging problems that she puts to them.
Yeah, I bet they bug you, though, for those answers, don't they, Shannon?
They're kind of sly. They kind of giggle about how they go about doing it. They'll say, well, what if we have this one situation, like I don't know what they're talking about because I've given it on an assignment, I play along. It builds bonding.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. All right, what about my other group? What did you all have to conversate about?
So we talked, I brought up that I was a little surprised by what you were saying, or a little caught off guard, I guess, in a way, maybe, about students being so focused on wanting to explore when I have to beg my students to look up something in class. And I mean, I nearly force them. I always have to go, pick up this phone. But and Tom had a good point. He said if you have them, that they don't want to be individual, and I think that ties into what you were saying about
that's a good point.
And that perhaps you turn that into okay, somebody look up that at the end, and then I'll ask everybody, or hey, you guys turn to each other and look it up together.
Right.
And I was going to ask Joel a question, and we timed out. I wondered what that looked like, because he mentioned in a previous time that we were talking about having students come up to the board when he could, and when it was, a small enough class to do so, or they were comfortable enough. And I wonder, do they, at least at the beginning, Joel, do they act like you're trying to pull their teeth out when you get them to come up to the board, or do you have a few shining stars that always get up? Have you ever had them come up together so that they have a buddy to keep them safe from evil Dr. Jones?
No. Generally, I don't ask it except in the upper level classes. Okay, because I remember as a student being sent to the board and humiliated several times. So I like people to stand up there and explain things, but I understand it's a tough situation at times. What I can't get them to do is critique each other's work.
Yeah.
So if one
Yeah.
student gets up there and presents something, the other students just kind of look at me like.
All right, what do we do now?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Y'all are giving me all kinds of, one of my favorite things to talk about are instructional strategies. And you got my brain ticking. This is wonderful. All right, well, what we're going to do, hold on, let me check my time. We're going to move on because we only have 12 more minutes and we still have 3 more things to go through. So what we may do is nix the interactive piece to kind of get through this in enough time and just interact together as a group. Let me ask you real quick, just for my knowledge, did you all receive a message in your breakout room where I said 20 seconds left?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm sending them, but I wasn't sure if they were getting there. All
I
right,
wasn't
cool.
reading them.
That's awesome. All right, so we've got number 4, multimedia technology. Tom kind of hit on this. You know, if you're talking about our traditional students, they are technocentric, but that doesn't mean they're techno-literate. And I think that's the key component when talking about this pillar. Technology makes, I loved what the literature review said, and let me find it so I say it exactly the way they did. But basically, technology expands your curriculum or your course horizontally, not vertically, because you're able to reach more people within your field and connect them with that technology. Again, we're talking about connections and relevancy to the field. And so that is one piece that can engage them at that deeper level, which according to the literature, that's what they are wanting, is that deeper level real world engagement. And then real quickly, I want to point out, and I was pretty surprised at this statistic. Some research suggests that students who use cell phones and other mobile devices for research, collaborative communication, or social-based learning activities have been shown to increase their engagement as much as 78%, which is exactly the opposite of what Cynthia was just saying. So I'm not real sure where they're getting their data from, but it's definitely not the bio classes that you're having issues with.
Government statistics.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
Statistics
funny.
paid for by
That's
Apple.
right.
I had an experience.
We'll have to contact Parsons and Taylor's about exactly where they got that 78% from.
Yeah.
All righty. So moving on to number 5.
Can I say one quick thing?
Yes.
That I ran into this the other day, and it kind of backs up what you're saying. There's a program out called Kahoot. Have you ever heard of
Yes.
Kahoot?
Yes.
Well, and I'd never really heard of it. But when the students were saying, "Oh yeah, that's a really great tool. We like to use that." So I said, "What the hell? Well, next review we'll use it." And their engagement went up 50%. I mean, because they're using
Okay.
their phones, they were working in teams to answer questions in the review, and it's a timed kind of game format. And that's not, to be honest with you, that's not something I could have done without the technology.
Well, I will say this, and because I'm kind of rushing through this last piece, and I apologize, that one of the things they said that they found with regards to the technology pillar is that our younger students, again, I'm kind of talking about our traditional students here, not necessarily our evening online graduate students, but our traditional students game. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And I just sat in an IT meeting today, and they are always trying to figure out in the server world how to get more juice to those people's games in those dorm rooms,
Yeah.
the internet juice. So I think that gaming piece of it does warrant some I don't want to say investigation, but does warrant at least trying it and seeing if that works. All right, so moving along to number 5, we have 2 instructional aspects seem to encourage engagement. One is engaging pedagogy, and the other is engaging curriculum. Now, what the literature found is, and we've all talked about this, and I'm not going to beat this dead horse, is we got to keep them active and the active learning thing. So that's where your engaging pedagogy comes. We've been over that. With regards to the engaging curriculum, what the literature found is they like the curriculum to connect to other curriculum.
Mhm.
So that, if I'm learning something in this class, how does it affect my next class? Or if I'm learning something in English, how is that going to help me here? So I think that's, when I look at the title, it says challenging instruction. To me, the challenge would be actually doing that within an instructional setting, joining my curriculum so that it warrants relevancy in another part of the curriculum. Now, how they said to handle that, they didn't. They just said cross-curricular approach engages people. But I think that too is something that warrants further exploration, is when we connect all those dots, instead of them having 5 separate classes. If we can connect 2 or 3 of those dots together, then they'll see the whole big picture and ultimately become more engaged.
Ellen, I will say one thing about that. It's easy in the composition classes because you can have them do their research and write about another class that they're in.
Right.
And so that just gives them their topic, and we just show them how to do it, but they'll be writing about something maybe from chemistry or history or
That's awesome.
nursing.
Yeah.
And,
What is that? ENG 380?
Well, and even 101 and 102 can do it as well.
Oh, okay.
So I encourage that, and they like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that the interconnectivity between subjects was kind of the biggest piece that I gleaned from that literature. All right, number 6. Here you go, Tom. Some formative assessment. So, 5 affecting teaching practices promise to increase engagement and learning. Creative, thoughtful, intentional design for learning, making learning meaningful, building relationships, improving teaching practice in the presence of peer teachers, and using assessment to improve learning and guide teaching. And so the literature said, given the opportunity to co-create assessment criteria with their teachers, students figure out the criteria of powerful work. And so that was like the one suggestion I gleaned from this. And I was a teacher for many years, and I was a math teacher, so like you can't really co-create assessment, X equals 5 or it doesn't. But if I were in a situation where we could decide together, how should this be graded? Now all of a sudden they have buy-in into that stake. So I think the other thing that I gleaned from the information from the literature is that they want to know that they're not learning for that particular assessment, your test or your exam, but they're learning so that they're able to develop further within their field. And I think sometimes we get all caught up in, we have a midterm, we have an exam, and this is your grade and that sort of thing. But I do think we need to consider their future when designing those particular pieces. So, hold on, let me see. All right, we're going to be about done. I obviously am not going to get through this presentation because I'm not going to keep you after. But what I do want to do is I want to kind of scroll through here, show you what the slides are about, and then if you want to go back and reference, this will be posted on our site. And I'll also put a link to the article from which this was retrieved. Okay? Does that sound okay to you all?
Yep.
I'm sure you don't mind me taking any more of your time. But I really have enjoyed this. This has been a wonderful discussion. So I've got some research-based practices for assessment, just kind of guiding us onto how to, number 6, take into account the importance of fostering learner motivation within your assessment. So it's not just a test at the end of the chapter. You know, we're motivated to learn this kind of thing. We're not going to clarify. We've done that pretty good. And then the last part, which is there's only a couple slides here, I have listed some different strategies for creating a culture of engagement. And you can read more about those in depth. I'll have all the notes, and again, you'll have the literature. Some more instructional design part of it, ideas and strategies that you can use or explore further. And then that's my summary page. Successful, engaging classrooms. We have relevance. We have realness. We have technology. We're positive. We're challenging. And that's something I haven't pointed out that I need to, that was recurring over and over again. As much as it sounds like we're trying to coddle our students into learning, the one thing they appreciate is rigor, and they respect it. So keep it up. Don't let your guard down. They may complain about it, but they appreciate it.
Objective
If
rigor.
I might take just a second.
Yes. Hurry, though. We're running out of time, Kumar.
Okay. Most of you probably already know, but there's also an app called Socrative. It's available on PC and on
Right.
Android and on Apple.
Yeah.
Socrative is a clicker app, and it's really good, particularly for science and math, because it allows you to do subscripts and superscripts within the program, and it allows you to add thumbnail with pictures. I usually add emoji and stuff. It's free. You can add, there's no restrictions. You can add as many questions as you want or as little as you want. It's called Socrative.
Yeah, we have a tutorial for that on our website. Yeah, Caroline brought that to our
Most
attention.
of you probably already know, but if you don't, Socrative is a free clicker app, and it's fantastic. It's very
Well, I
very
like that it does superscripts and subscripts, because as a former math teacher, I know those are hard to come by.
very hard to do, and so you can literally write an equation or a problem on
Right.
the embedded screen, so it looks very professional. So just want to throw that out there. And
No, that's beautiful. Thank you, Kumar. Now, I was trying to get a whole laundry, whoopsie, that's me. I was trying to get a whole laundry list of teaching resources, but I found 2 really good ones. And so once this is up and posted, I highly recommend you go check these 2 sites out. I have a description, but you can read that on the website. All right, folks. This is probably one of the most enjoyable webinars I have conducted for Midway since I started. I really appreciate you guys. I hope you gleaned something from it. And if anything, I am glad to see my people, because I haven't seen people in a long time.
And don't forget the blog.
That's right. You all take care and holler if you need me, all right?
Thank you.
See you
All right.
later, Ellen.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.